In November last year, Dark Sector was made free on Steam, so I figured about time I got on playing it. The game went through some major changes throughout its long development, first announced in 2000 and finally releasing 8 years later to mixed reception. But now it's my turn to give my take on the game, and afterwards I'll be covering the new Warframe update, Tekrot Encore, so stick around for that. The first thing I need to get out of the way is Dark Sector is it does not run well on current systems. I had this game crash on me more times than I can count, but was able to fix it. For some reason, this game doesn't like being installed outside of the C drive and bugs out if you do, like not playing sound. But installing in the C drive didn't help with the regular crashes, so I tried downgrading PhysX to the version that comes with the game. Still crashing. I tried running in compatibility mode. No help there. An administrator, because why the hell not? Then finally, like an angel, DG Voodoo saved the day. If you have the same issues as me with running this game, here's what you do. You install DG Voodoo, and you copy the files from the MS x86 folder into the same folder as the game's executable, which, if you have a Steam copy, you can find by clicking the Coconuts library page, manage, and then browse local files. And on a less game-breaking level, you'll have to fix the aspect ratio if you're running in widescreen. Somehow the devs mixed up the 4:3 and 16:9 aspect ratios when porting it to PC. So, if you don't fix it manually, you'll have a stretched screen. I'll have a guide linked to the description for this, since I think I've done enough yapping about how to fix this game in order to get into the game itself. I'm only going to be covering a single player campaign, so sorry to any Dark Sector multiplayer fans, but I'm not hosting a LAN party right now. The single player campaign focuses on CIA agent Hayden Tenno being deployed into the fictional Soviet country of Latvia, with an outbreak of a disease known as a Texite virus, which mutates its victims into distorted forms of supernatural powers. It's a cool concept, and that cool factor is kept in the gameplay. The game has a strong style to it. I like the lighting with its solid contrast in spite of its otherwise grungy aesthetics. It's pretty gory, so much that it got banned in Australia back in the day. Finishes are a neat mechanic, and quite satisfying to pull off, but lacking in animation variety. The graphics are dyed in the muddy greys and browns of pretty much every shooter in the noughties, with the corresponding cover shooting. Enemies take out your health pretty quick, making you have to hide behind cover until your screen stops flashing red. The game's at its best when throwing a mix of enemies at you, using melee enemies to force you out of cover and into the fire of hit scan and projectile throwing enemies. You're forced to be aware of your surroundings, including using interactable objects to create or move cover. I find the later game to be much more fun than the early game, but it never became too much of a slog for me. For the first part of the game, combat involves using your glaive, your weak little pistol, and stolen enemy weapons, which self-destruct after a short time, making you have to constantly switch weapons until you can get a better permanent weapon. Or, well, you would have to switch weapons if you couldn't just handle everything by hiding behind cover and whacking stuff with your glaive over and over and over. It's not bad per se, but it can get tedious after a while. The same with sections of combat against only melee enemies, which you can just dodge around and whack with your glaive. There is some depth here, with a strong throw requiring precise timing, but it could certainly be better, and I can't help but think that its mechanics would fit better in a movement shooter, especially with its finishes requiring you to get up close to enemies. It wasn't until late in the game that the glaive stopped overshadowing the guns, when I saved up for this mean shotgun, upgraded it for maximum damage against infected enemies. It removed the tedium from those encounters immediately, something that could have become a significant issue in the late game, with enemies getting tankier. Better guns become available as the game progresses, with half only becoming available from mid-game onwards, which somewhat discourages the player from getting new weapons earlier on, as money is limited and upgrades can't be removed. This may result in players roughing it through the early game with only the default gear, having a worse time for it. Limits on money and upgrades also meant that experimenting with different weapons to find one that fits your playstyle is something that has to occur over multiple playthroughs. With regards to infected enemies, the game suffers from what I'm calling the bigger imp issue, in which enemies get tankier, but not much changes out of their behaviour or how you combat them. It's also an issue I have with Unreal, which Digital Extremes previously worked on back in the 90s alongside Epic, which, small world. Despite me naming it after Doom, I find that Doom games avoid this issue through deliberate enemy placement, making the Baron and Hell Knight threats as opposed to just bigger imps. They have to be used somewhat sparingly so that you feel that oh shit moment when they appear. This is something that Dark Sector fails to do for infected enemies, with them getting bulkier throughout the game, and the new version just slotting right into the role of their weaker counterparts with no noise outside of some of them exploding on death, which, to their credit, is fun next to nice area denial, or turning invisible sometimes while still attacking, moving, and being countered the same way. Human enemies are much better designed, with the cybersuit troopers and riot soldiers standing out as a threat and disrupting combat. Riot soldiers force you to use your guns, since the best way to combat them in the early and mid-game is to use your glaive to force them to move their shield, at which point you can shoot them. The threat of them showing up in a fight forces the player to stay aware of their surroundings, as if they can get in close and catch you off guard, they can deal a lot of damage. Cybersuit troopers too cause you to significantly switch up combat, being insanely tanky and with massive damage output that puts you on the back foot. The Cyber Demon of Dark Sector in my Doom comparison. Human enemies also like throwing grenades, including Empharon gas canisters, which act as area denial, another nice mechanic. All of this forcing out of cover and into gunfire, where you have to quickly assess where the best place is to run before you get turned into Swiss cheese. Bosses are pretty good in my opinion, being well established in the world and playing well. I find it a bit infuriating that they can often one-shot you, but no fight is too long, so I can only be so mad. Except for the second task boss, which is extremely tedious. Being forced to just wait and dodge until the boss randomly does an action that lets you actually deal damage. It's not hard, just kinda time consuming. I felt like I was doing something wrong, but I just don't know what. That said, the boss's designs do a good job of getting you to engage with the game's mechanics properly. I also really enjoy how you get to pilot the Jackal yourself, complete with the same abilities and weaknesses as boss you have faced. Similarly, though not a boss, I really like that you can pick up and use the Cybersuit Troopers' chain guns after defeating them. It's a nice power trip and shakes up the usual gameplay. Your abilities, both glaive and otherwise, fundamentally change how you play the game throughout. Being able to control the trajectory of the glaive after you throw it is cool, but it's pretty awkward to control. I found it a little difficult to pick up, especially in the first puzzle requiring this ability. Once you get the hang of it, the glaive is great. You wind up pretty overpowered later on, and it's a ride once you have all your abilities. On your abilities, I enjoy how the amount of energy available for them is shown diegetically via the glowing areas on the arm, though think it might have helped to mention this in the ability tutorial text. The game's base difficulty is, in my opinion, not too hard. There's some fights where I would die a couple of times, but the frequent checkpointing and automatic health regen make for a pretty forgiving experience. That said, once you beat the game on normal difficulty, you unlock brutal difficulty, which certainly lives up to its name. You die a lot faster on normal difficulty, which has its pros and cons from a gameplay perspective. It's a good test of skill and delivers on the difficulty lacking in the regular playthrough, but also forces you to play much more cautiously, not pushing forward or utilising turrets, since doing so would put you in too much danger, and likely kill you immediately, which can get pretty tedious and annoying, becoming just repetitive glaive throwing and sniping. The increased difficulty does shake up monotony in some ways though, with Riot and Cybersuit soldiers becoming even bigger threats. Riot soldiers now kill you in one hit, which feels a bit cheap, but dying to them is always a skill issue, so I can't complain too much. Brutal mode really instills a constant vigilance into the player, with previously trivial enemies also becoming life-ending threats in a way that they weren't before, especially if they can sneak up on you. It's a mixed bag in that it exacerbates some of the game's prior issues to a glaring degree, but for those who like the game, it's a fun second playthrough. Outside of the crashing, the game also has some more general jank to it. Enemies can get bugged when trying to go through doorways and just stand there until disturbed. Enemies also like to snap between positions when going to or from cover, which is a bit jarring. Default controls kinda suck, and the worst offender, which I don't think you can change, is that dodge, cover and sprint are all on the same button, control by default. This is probably because it's a port of a console game, so originally had less buttons to work with, but should be something you can change. The game also likes to reset your audio and keybind settings when you close it, which is frustrating. Audio is a mixed bag. I generally like the game's soundtrack with a mix of atmosphere and drums. In fact, you're listening to some of it right now. But some tracks can be pretty annoying and repetitive at times. Music likes to cut off suddenly after ending a battle or moving into a new area, which is pretty jarring. The same cutoff also happens with environmental audio limited to specific areas, where instead of a clean fade out with distance, it just stops. Weapons sound pleasantly punchy, both yours and your enemies, and speaking of enemies, I like the growls and squeals of the infested, they really sell the vibe. On the other hand, while human enemies announce their presence and actions clearly, they're just kinda uninteresting and extremely repetitive. I will say, however, that their screams of agony and fear are fittingly distressing, if also repetitive. The story is passable but nothing special. I just couldn't get that invested in any of the characters, but appreciated the world building. Cutscenes are frequent enough that you don't feel like you're continuing from the environment as too aimless. The game certainly has an interesting premise, but fails to fully get into it or its themes. There's also an accompanying comic, which gives backstory to and fleshes out the game's setting, as did its protagonist Hayden Taylor himself, all with gorgeous illustrations. While it's nice supplemental material, it's definitely not required reading for the game's story, instead acting largely as a promotional material prior to the game's release. On the whole, I like this game. It's not the greatest, but it doesn't have to be a good time. The game feels kinda like it's not sure what it wants to be a lot of the time, taking from a range of inspirations, most prominently Resident Evil 4 and Gears of War, but failing to carve out a clear identity from them. For what it is, I recommend it for a good 8 or so hours of fun. I do, however, need to revisit the crashing. This game has not been updated for modern systems, yet the publisher is still charging $6.99 for a buggy, broken game, as it has done for around a decade, without any sales for years prior to the brief time when it was free. I know it's not a lot, but it feels off since the labour of fixing it falls to fans unable to play the product they bought. With all that said, it's about time I address the elephant in the room: Warframe. Dark Sector was originally pitched as a sci-fi concept, much more similar to Warframe than the final version you can play today. This version of the game was rejected by every publisher they went to, in what they were later dubbed the rejection tool. As Steve Sinclair, the game's director, said to PC Gamer in 2023, quote, "I was on the road pitching for a year, all over the world with a little QPC that would always get scrubbed by the bomb squads." The response? Sci-fi was dead. The team would, in the face of this continuous rejection, compromise their vision for it. Space was swapped out for a Cold War Soviet country, and biomechanical suits for the Technocyte virus. While many elements remain, you can feel the compromises made throughout. I think this is a major component of why the game feels so unsure of its identity. Following Dark Sector, as Sheldon Carter put in the same PC Gamer article, the bottom fell out of all the mid-sized developers. Digital Extremes had to lay off a third of their staff, and had just enough time and budget for one more project. Having already given up on and heavily compromised their artistic vision years prior, they gave that original concept one last shot. That concept would become Warframe. It was rough sailing, especially since they chose to go the free-to-play model before that was an established thing in PC games. Digital Extremes would publish the game themselves, unable to get publishers to take them on. Thankfully, it paid off. Today, 12 years later, Digital Extremes is thriving, with not only Warframe, but a second project, Soulframe, currently in closed beta. I plan on covering that latter project another time, but not today. As you might have guessed from this video or the one prior, I'm a major fan of Warframe. For so much of this game, I was metaphorically pointing at the screen every time something that would make it into Warframe appeared. I think that, for me at least, this game is stuck in Warframe's shadow now, and that's kind of a shame. But if it weren't for Warframe, I would have never found out about this game, in large part because at the time it was released, I was too young for it and too busy playing Wii Sports Resort and Skylanders. With this in mind, I enjoy Dark Sector in and of itself, but also as part of a larger context of struggling with delivering on an artistic vision under the restrictions of capitalism and publishers' whims. And damn ain't there common struggles for us creatives. And finally, it's new Warframe update time. TechRoad Encore brings us the second part of Warframe 1999, with its highly anticipated boy band liches and new proto-frames, and most importantly, Kalimos is back. But first, I did Temporal Archimedia. I hadn't done Deep Archimedia before, so this was a new experience, and one I enjoyed. It got me to use and appreciate a Warframe I wouldn't usually, Dagath, to max out the rewards and unlock Elite Temporal Archimedia. It was tough, but fun, and the condition of enemies only taking much damage from arch guns got me to use a mechanic I so often neglect. I somehow managed to dodge the connectivity issues in my own runs, but have seen the announcement about it. Automatic squad disbanding is something that's going to take some adjusting to. There was something nice about running multiple Void Fisher missions back to back with the same random squad, so I can't say I'm entirely happy about the change, even if it does eliminate the tedium of more often just going to manually leave the squad immediately. The immediate rollout was particularly interesting, with players getting softlocks, but has been fixed now. Getting back to gameplay, Infested Liches are pretty fun. They feel much less grindy than the other Liches that came before them, even if antivirus mod bounty RNG can screw you over, and have nice rewards for defeating them. Their final showdown is kinda insane, with those stage lights being my worst enemy with operator ability disabled. You kinda have to run a tanky frame like Rhino or Dante, and if you do, you should be fine. The Liches themselves have a load of character, and the lines are funny and fitting with the context of their creation. Something commentary on corporations wanting control over and wanting to replace creatives. But I do wish they had something like a quest introducing them and their personalities. Let us hear Owie's reaction to the Liches. I love the new proto-frame designs and their character arcs. Their stories touch on some serious themes and demonstrate great dynamics between characters. They're flawed, but that's what I love about them. I kinda wish alcoholism was treated more seriously within the writing, even if I honestly don't know how to go about that without significantly changing the content of the narrative and characters. I will acknowledge that getting shit-faced does serve a narrative role in getting characters to open up somewhat, but that's somewhat besides the point. And less seriously, I have beef with whoever decided to make Velemir straight and undateable. Temple's parts are farmed in a similar manner to Lavos or Citrine, with an endless mission that gives both warframe and weapon parts, and a currency to exchange for parts with a vendor as part of a sort of pity system. The mission itself is a fun spin on a defense mission, and one I've enjoyed running. The reduced amount of waves are very welcome with how tedious defense can be. I wish there were more songs played in the concert within than just the one, in large part because I really like the one they have, just so I wish DE had given us more online songs alongside the Liches. I really enjoy Temple's mechanics, with caveats. Their seeming is very fun. I like their rhythm mechanics, in theory. The timing can be a little hard to get for a couple of reasons. Having to hit on the offbeat is challenging and mess with my rhythm game muscle memory, but fits with their personality, so I actually like that aspect. The primary issue for me is how hard the metronome can be to make out. The sound of it blending into the overall noise of the mission, and the visual falling to the wayside as you focus on enemies and movement. I'm sure if I played them enough I could get the timing down, but what about players not wanting to stick with it? Beneath all this, the core issue is that Warframe just isn't a rhythm game. A game like Metal Hellsinger works because you shoot to the same rhythm you're headbanging to. It's intuitive, and means that it quickly becomes something you don't have to actively focus on. And that sorts right into the overall gameplay loop. But hey, wait, Warframe already has a solution. Kinda. Octavia. You actually hear the music, so when you perform actions to the beat, it just works. I would suggest implementing something similar to this in a rework. Ranting about rhythm mechanics aside, Tempo holds up pretty well strength-wise. I'm pretty mediocre at the game generally, but was able to get some nice damage in. The one is very replaceable, even if fun to spam, but the rest of their abilities are brilliant. I love some juicy critical hits, so their 2 is ideal for me, plus their 3 is great for survivability, and Lizzie is inherently cool as a flamethrower guitar, on top of being pretty good in combat. I ended up taking so long to get this video out, that one of the things I asked for last video has come true. Just before I started recording, the Ironweaver update was announced, with Rusalka on the throne, so I'm very happy about that. And I think that's everything. I've uploaded the scans of the Dark Sector Zero comic for anyone interested, since I couldn't find any while researching. It's linked in the description alongside resources mentioned and shown in the video. And while you're down there, why not like, subscribe, and perhaps comment to let me know your thoughts on either or both of the games here. And if you want to hear even more from me, follow me on Blue Sky and Tumblr to see art and opinions that don't make their way into videos. Have a great day, and see you around.